Hey guys, it's Lauren Daigle. I am elated to do what we're about to do today. I was talking with my manager last week and I said, I really want to interview someone who is on the scenes firsthand, who's had some experience with all of this COVID stuff. I think I'm hearing all different stories, different things in the media, different things from friends. And I was like, I just want to hear what someone is going through point blank. And today we have Dr. Meghan Maslanka, and she is down in New Orleans. And I would just like to welcome her right now.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much for having me. I think this is a wonderful idea. I'm really excited. I'm glad to tell you anything that you want to know.
Yay.
I'm an emergency physician and a disaster medicine physician. And right now I'm working at the New Orleans Convention Center, working as their medical operations manager. So for those of you who don't quite know what's going on at the convention center, we opened up what's called a medical monitoring center for patients. And we've had to sort of reconceptualize that vision a couple different times to suit the need. So it's been a really interesting journey so far.
So did all 1,000 beds get filled?
No.
Or, okay.
No.
How many beds have they seen filled?
I think we maxed at about 105 yesterday.
Okay.
Which is good. So
Mhm.
that's a really good thing. And I'm really proud of Louisiana. So Louisiana was way ahead of the game with this. And so what they've done was proactive. They didn't wait until the hospitals were bursting at the seams to build this. They started putting it together weeks before they anticipated reaching that point. So if it happened and we were faced with a worst case scenario, we had something ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
And the beautiful thing is that all of the physical distancing with continued social interaction has made a difference. And our worst case scenario doesn't seem to be playing out.
I was in Grand Rapids when we had our last show, and I was on an interview. Someone from New Orleans called me, ironically, like that it would be someone from New Orleans. And they said, this is an opportunity for the younger generation to show the older generation how we care. And I thought, wow, that is so profound, because he said, and this is prior to us seeing younger cases. This is when it had first erupted and they were seeing it really hit the older generation. And he was saying, like, how often in culture do we all lay aside our plans and our thoughts and, what we want to wake up and do in the morning to care for our neighbor, really to love our neighbor, greater than our plans, greater than our aspirations, greater than the cup of coffee that is sitting at PJ's, greater than CC's, all of these places, like really sacrificing. And I think some people I've seen do it in a way that it actually just didn't feel like a sacrifice. It felt like a privilege to get to sit aside a moment and say, I care about the others around me, greater than myself. And I want to do something about that and be proactive in that. Do you think that, I just heard you mention, people keeping social distance and things like that. Do you think that the numbers were overestimated, or do you think that the social distancing has actually been effective, has played a part in keeping it down, or do you think it was all just a guessing game?
I think the distancing made a huge impact.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's just in time too, especially right before all of the St. Patrick's Day festivities. I think if they hadn't put the brakes on all of that, we would have faced a worst case scenario. But based on the timing of everything, I think they were able to slow things down enough. And we're at where our hospitals are able to handle capacity. So now our question becomes, what happens when we reopen?
Do you think that smaller towns can start opening, or do you think that it should stay let's keep this as a standstill right now, because it is being effective? It's actually helping reduce the spread of this virus. I was explaining to someone the other day, it's not and this sounds very morbid, but it's not necessarily the number of deaths as much as it is the rapidity, how fast, how rapid this is growing, to not overwhelm the system in a way that we couldn't keep up. Does that sound correct, or what are your thoughts on that?
The whole purpose of doing that is just to spread out the number of cases over a longer period of time. Like, people are going to continue to get this, but to not have a giant spike that completely overwhelms all of your healthcare resources is what makes a really big difference.
What are some of the symptoms of maybe some of the most severe cases that y'all have witnessed or that have been in the convention center? And what are some of the milder cases?
I saw tons of patients with COVID, tons of patients, from having no symptoms at all to having symptoms that were completely unrelated and you felt completely blindsided by the diagnosis, to people who were extremely severe. So the good news is that the people who are extremely severe were definitely, the smaller numbers, but they still, even though it's the smaller percentage, it was still large numbers of patients, and they were so sick. I've never really seen patients that kind of sick, and it would come on really suddenly, just sort of out of nowhere. Someone would become really, really short of breath. And I know that everybody was knows that the older populations and the folks with a lot of medical issues are more prone to having more severe illness, but we saw it happen in people that you wouldn't expect, and that made it scary. But then I saw the other extreme where, I saw a lot of people only lost their taste and smell, and that was their only symptoms. Or some people had like pain on their side, and that was their only symptom. So it's presented in all sorts of unexpected ways.
Yeah.
And for a while it became, it looks like something that's not at all COVID, but it's definitely going to turn out to be COVID, and it would.
Do you know if where we're at with the vaccine, or how fast or slow things like that take to kind of fall into the system?
A year away is what people say. It takes time to develop that, and it has to go through testing, and they make sure that the vaccines are safe before anybody gets administered a vaccine. So it's got to go through a lot of vetting once they go through and actually discover what works as a vaccine. We've come so long from the first days and how testing first started, where we had such little access, and it was this very formal, long process to be able to get somebody tested and this very specific criteria. And now almost every major hospital system in New Orleans has access to rapid testing, which is big. Okay. That just happened. It's just days ago that the last major, hospital got access to that. So, there's still a ways to go. And I think about other areas that don't have the resources that a city does. And I know that there are smaller hospitals in more rural areas that probably still have really significant limitations in their ability to test patients.
And then with the rapid test, how does that work?
So I'm not gonna lie. The last time I was in my hospital was well before it got access to the rapid tests.
Okay.
We're over here at the convention center, and we're working really hard to get access to tests so that we can get some negative tests for our nursing home patients to be able to get them back to their nursing. We don't have those yet because, like I said, testing is always improving. Nobody's extremely flush in tests. So we should be able to set that up, but it's still in process. So there'll be the 24 turnaround hour, 24 hours, which is good. And yes, world's better than when this first started, when you were waiting 7 to 10 days for a test result. So 24 hours, I'm happy with. These 15-minute tests are something else. And
so at the convention center, are y'all still low on tests? Is it still hard to get tests at some of these other major hospitals? Are they still having to turn away people because they're running out of tests and there's only a certain amount of people that they can test?
No. So the hospitals, at least all of the large hospitals here, are able to test all the patients they want to.
Okay.
Specific tests that they have to do so tend to vary. So some healthcare settings, like a clinic, you're much more likely to have a test that takes results, that won't come back for a couple of days.
Okay.
Whereas in a patient setting, you're seeing tests that come back a lot faster. And now we're seeing that open up to emergency departments, where the tests are able to come back faster. And we're going to see it trickle down to the other areas as well as that happens. And we'll start to see it in urgent cares and start to see it in clinics, but we're not quite seeing that just yet.
How long is one contagious? Is there a number, or is it pretty broad at this?
Afebrile and asymptomatic for 3 days, with
Okay.
at least having had 7 days passed since the onset of your illness.
Okay.
So, is that a perfect number? Probably not. And I'm not an immunologist.
Yep.
But
yeah.
We're trying to be as safe as possible before we send people home. And that's sort of the determinant that we've found to use.
I've just been trying to think, and I thought about writing letters for the longest time. I actually, I have some stationery with me because I was like, I'm going to write letters before this is over. And my thought was, I'll just spray it down to where it's dripping wet with the Lysol or something. And then I'll send it on over, even though it, will have to go through the mail. I don't know. I was just like, I wonder if it's okay to accept those kinds of things.
Yes. And we can always handle it with gloves, we'll open up the gloves, slap it right up on the wall. And we love to look at them. It's the little things that make a difference,
How can we as the people on the outside help you guys? Are there ways to encourage, send in a letter, and everybody send in a letter. And how cool would it be if we overwhelmed the hospitals with more letters than patients? That would be pretty awesome.
I think that the country has done such a wonderful job of supporting us as healthcare workers and making us feel loved. But I know that a lot of just like people in general outside of healthcare are having a really hard time. There are people battling depression. There are people with addictions who have a really hard time not going to their regular groups. I know tons of people lost their jobs. I think just continuing to reach out and support each other is sort of the biggest thing that we can do in this. And also thinking about those neighbors who did lose their job and don't have food. I mean, there were over 2,000 people in line for the food bank the other day. So
wow.
For those of us who are lucky enough to have, to try to give and to keep the rest of our community afloat, I think is the most thing any one of us can do right now.
Have you seen areas where people have actually helped it, and with the masks and things like that? Is that a genuine need? Is that really people that are sitting there with the mask? I went into the doctor the other day to get some blood work done, and they handed me a mask, and it was a handmade mask from some cloth that some lady turned in. And I said, wait, y'all are really using these? And they said, yeah. I said, well, with all the sanitization stuff, I thought for sure all these people are making them, but there's no way that the hospitals are going to use it because COVID can exist on clothing. I was like, what in the world? And she said, well, we get the masks, then we sanitize the masks and we use them. And I thought, wow, that's pretty amazing. To see that people coming together really is making an impact. It really is helping. Have you seen things like that in effect that have been useful and have been good?
Sure. I have one of those masks actually. And so the big reason that we use them is those help prevent spread of infection. Those masks aren't protected for the person who wears them, but if the person who wears them is speaking or doing anything that causes aerosolization or droplets, it's keeping that from going out and potentially infecting other people. if you are infectious.
Have you seen a place or a point in the process of all of this where maybe some of the nurses or staff members or people who are around in this environment have had low lows, have plummeted? And if so, are there other ways that we as people on the outside can help encourage and build up the healthcare workers?
So we have this wall of cards that say thank you, and just like little things, even just things, something, you know, a picture a kid drew or something someone wrote on cardboard or sent a little plate of cookies or something like that. And we keep that wall, and we call it the wall of morale. And if you start to have a bad day, you go in to like grab a glass of water, and you just stand there and you take it all in, and you know that the public has your back, you know?
Yeah.
And it keeps going.
It is amazing. It's a marvel. Honestly, I'm pretty amazed by it all. But thank you. Your time is precious. I'm grateful. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.